Hi everyone, just a bit of an impromptu live tonight. It's getting late Sydney time, but I still thought I would pop on and say hello. Um, it's been a busy week, lots of lives this week and lots of new subs. And so I thought it would be a good idea to have a bit of a chat about what we've talked about so far. Hey Ben, nice to see you. So, just a little bit of an update on, I guess, everything we've covered so far and where we're still heading with the channel, because we've got lots, like hundreds of new subs coming in who may or may not know much about Delphi and certainly may or may not know how much we've covered over the past few months. So, yeah, welcome everybody. I know this is often a bit of a slow time to go online, but it's a great time here in Australia. Oh, hey Dave, nice to see you. And so I just thought I'd do a really quick video. See through. That's the member of the month at the moment, See Through, who got us our document, which we have to finish off. So, yeah, I wanted to kind of welcome all of the new subscribers. There's been a lot, and I'm so amazed that the channel is really starting to take off, and that's so exciting. Now, I know some of the new subscribers will come here for Delphi content. The poll I did earlier today still suggests Delphi is what most people want to hear about. But as most of you know, I am also a clinical psychologist. And so I love to add some psychology related stuff both into Delphi and separately too. So I'm going to keep updating the channel with a bit of Delphi, a bit of psychology, mostly Delphi, because let's face it, that's what we all have got into and that's what this channel started with. But I will be inserting a little bit more psychology related content and wellness related content as well. So definitely everybody just let me know what you guys are kind of after on the channel, what you're looking into, what you'd like to hear more about. It's a wonderful community for anyone new joining the channel. So definitely join the lives, have a chat with us, join the discussions on the community page. Hey, Kelly, nice to see you. So good to see some of the regulars in here. So I was just explaining to our new subs who have joined over the last week. It's been a massive influx. I think we've hit the algorithm that we're in a really friendly community, a community of people who get along. Whether you believe Rick Allen is guilty or you believe he's innocent, you're welcome here. We've really had so many wonderful discussions with lots of different opinions. For anyone new to my channel, you'll probably realize very quickly that I do believe that Richard Allen is innocent and wrongly convicted. However, I'm open to all opinions. One of the things we mainly do here at the channel is we look at the evidence. And if anyone has not followed Delphi, this is a horrific crime that occurred in 2017. I've done an introductory video and posted that on the video section. So if anyone doesn't know much about the case, that's just a really brief explainer. For all of you guys in here, you're probably like, yeah, I already know all of that. And I missed out a lot of important stuff as well. And so basically, that could be your first stop if you wanted to just go, what is Delphi? What are they even talking about? No worries, Kelly. Of course, you need to get your sleep. I'm going to go to sleep soon too. It's getting late here and I've had a big therapy day. So, yeah, essentially, wait a second. I have headphones on because the frogs are driving me nuts, but it's a bit weird talking with the headphones on. So yeah, basically what we have done so far is we've looked at the evidence as it's been released. So during the case, after the murders of Abby and Libby in 2017, the case was not solved. There were no arrests made. And so there was this long wait for the families and the community at large to get justice for Abby and Libby. And in 2022, there was a shock arrest of someone that had not been discussed, no one was aware of, and his name was Richard Allen. And in the ensuing couple of years, Richard Allen was incarcerated, and we heard some stuff around pre-trial stuff, some really wild and unusual things coming out. And then finally, it all culminated in the trial of Richard Allen, just over a year ago now, in October and November of 2024. Now, there was a strict gag order on this case, and so no one had very much information. We'd had a little bit sort of leaked at points, and there was a little bit of information that came out in some of the pre-trial proceedings, like the Franks memo, which we'll talk about in more detail in over time. I didn't include that in the intro video, but we will certainly do some more intro videos to include some of these other themes that were also relevant in the case. The gag order was lifted after sentencing, I believe. So that was late last year. And all of a sudden, over, gosh, I'd probably say like the last 6 months or more now, we have received slow dribbles of information about the case. And the more that gets released and looked into, the more we find things to dig in and analyze. It's a fascinating case. It's a case that divides us all. Well, not just all, but it divides a lot of people. And as I mentioned before, I would say that it's almost 50-50 in terms of who believes Rick Allen is guilty and innocent in my community. So, as I said, everybody is welcome. So I just wanted to talk through, I guess, what we've done so far and a bit of a recap for the regulars, but also for the new people and also for myself, because sometimes I forget. I've done so many videos. I'm a bit of a prolific live streamer. I really love to talk about Delphi, and I really like to analyze the evidence in detail. And so, yeah, I've been putting out these videos quite a lot, particularly over the last few months. But probably first started about 6 months ago. So, what have we discovered so far? Why are we still stuck on this case, and why are so many of us still of the belief that Rick Allen may indeed be innocent? Well, let's start with the lost tip narrative. And the lost tip narrative is basically the story that the state law enforcement told the jury and the world, I suppose. Hey, Anarch, welcome. Nice to see you. Just doing a little bit of a recap, a very short live today. Got lots of new subs in, so we're just doing a quick recap. So, the lost tip narrative is the story that law enforcement and the state used to explain where Rick Allen's name came from. And the idea here was that Rick Allen had come in very early and admitted he was on the trails that day as a witness, and he had provided, I guess, a tip and a narrative. He provided his phone information, and this was all back in 2017, just a few days after the murders occurred. So, what we were told in the probable cause affidavit, and then subsequently it was elaborated on in the trial, was that that information had inexplicably been lost and then found again in 2022, just weeks before they arrested Rick Allen. Now, that story really sounded odd to most of us, right? Most of us would think that just does not make sense. We're dealing with a double homicide of two juvenile girls in a small town in Indiana. How on earth did they lose and forget about the one man that was on the trails during the key time window? So, I'm not going to go into all the nitty gritty details, but just reminding everybody that the lost tip narrative is huge. And I think even if you believe Rick is guilty, you've got to admit that story doesn't make sense, because it gets worse. It gets even worse, because it's not just that they now say that they lost it and it reappeared in 2022, but when it reappears, it has the words cleared on it, lead cleared. So, not only did it disappear, it got cleared, but they don't know who cleared it. But wait, there's more. This lost tip narrative is the gift that keeps on giving, because when they finally release all of this information, we see even more anomalies. Well, first of all, the man who interviewed Richard Allen just days after the murders and the discovery of the bodies of the poor, beautiful girls, well, he was a conservation officer, Dan Doolan, and he was on the stage just a day or so later with the rest of the main, I guess, officers involved in the investigation, and they were appealing for Bridge Guy. Now, again, you need to watch the intro video, otherwise, none of this makes sense. But they had a picture of Bridge Guy. Now, as I just mentioned, Rick was the only person, the only male person, sorry, who had said they were on the trails that day during the crime window. The rest of the males that arrived after the abduction. And so, interestingly, Bridge Guy looks like potentially a middle aged man. Now, Rick Allen is a middle aged man. And Dan Doolan stood on the stage with the rest of the investigative team, or the ones that were at the press conference, appealing for anyone who had seen a man that looked like Bridge Guy. And yet he'd just spoken to Rick Allen just a couple of days earlier. Pretty hard to forget the one man that was on the trails during the crime window. But it gets worse. Because when we see the tip sheet, we finally see it, they release that exhibit, we notice another thing. Not only did Dan Doolan look at this tip, but it was typed by others, it was received by others, and one of the names that pops up on it is Jerry Holman. Jerry Holman was a lieutenant. He still is. He's won awards for his work, and however, this seems like a pretty big problem because it says the tip was received by Jerry Holman. So the lead investigator receives this tip just days after the murders and just days before the press conference. And it then passes through Dan Doolan, who actually meets Rick in person and interviews him. And then it also passes through, I suppose, administrative staff that are typing it in and, doing all the administrative aspects. And then there's also a little annotation written on it that says that Rick's phone info was provided to the ISP, which is the Indiana State Police. Now, the problem here is, again, that according to Dan Doolan, he provided that information to a specific group of investigators who were responsible for the digital data. So we've now got how many different personnel within Indiana State Police and Delphi Police that have touched this tip, and yet somehow it's inexplicably been forgotten within days and gone missing. Remember, it is just the one man who places himself on the trails in the key crime window, the abduction window. But there's more. Because when we look at the whole story, the testimony, and the actual paperwork, we find out that the person who supposedly found the tip, the person who made this amazing discovery in 2022, is a retired CPS worker who is an older lady named Kathy Shank, and she was helping out with filing and getting things organized, and that's when she found this lost tip in a folder in a banker's box, or who knows, was it in the banker's box and then they put it into a file that she did and then they found it? I don't know. The story is just too confusing. But either way, she says she finds it in 2022. But when we look at that document, we discover Kathy Shank printed it in 2019. Interesting. It was seen in 2017 when he first came in, passed through multiple staff hands in the Indiana State Police and Delphi Police, and then it was printed by the very person who miraculously found it in 2022, only she'd printed it in 2019. That's the lost tip narrative, everyone, and it is so confusing. There are so many layers to it. There's more to look at. Yes, Rick did say he was on the trails that day during that window. However, we also know that another scary looking person was seen in that window too. And whilst people who believe Rick is guilty think they're the same person, we've looked at a timeline that actually excludes Rick. And that's in the Timeline series, which was done quite a few months ago. So check that out, and we're going to update and refresh that too, because I think a lot of us have kind of forgotten a lot of this stuff. There's just so much to dig into. So on to the next thing, and this was a massive video back again a few months ago. I believe this was September, where we talked about geofencing and phone data, because this is another inexplicable part of this investigation. And I really am incredulous as I speak. You can hear it in my tone because it just doesn't make sense. So apparently, although Rick did provide his phone identifier, he willingly handed over his phone to Dan Doolan, and Dan Doolan or somebody has written on that tip that the phone information was provided to the ISP. Surprisingly, there doesn't seem to be any information telling us what happened to Rick's phone that day. And I find this surprising for two reasons. One, Rick's phone would have to show something. It would either have to show that he was around the area of the trails at the time of the murders and abduction, or it would show that he was at home, or it would show he was there earlier in the day and then he was at home, or it would show it was turned off all day or at home all day. That phone would have a story to tell. And whatever story it had to tell would have to suit one side or the other. It couldn't be ambiguous, because if his phone is at home all day, switched off all day, or at the trails during the crime window, well, that would certainly be concerning and most likely be seen as circumstantial yet inculpatory evidence. And if it shows that he was at the trails earlier in the day and then went home, well, that would be exculpatory. Now, some people remark that cell tower data is not super accurate, and they would be right. In a small town like Delphi, there's only two towers, and two towers with overlapping sectors are probably not going to be the most helpful to locate GPS coordinates. However, it could still be used to track behavioral timelines, and also they were also able to obtain geofencing data. Now, I'm not going to go into lots of depth here because you kind of need to look at it over the hour and a half or 2 hours that we discussed it, because there's lots of details. But I suppose what I'm saying here is that data, the phone data, was certainly potentially holding a key to understanding an alibi, and yet it was suppressed. It was suppressed pre-trial, and so the jury never heard it, and it was never analysed. After that, we've moved on to Libby's phone data, and in Libby's phone data, there are less anomalies. Libby's phone data tells the story of the last hours of the girls' lives. It's a horrendous story. It's incredibly sad. And this is the one time I'm not wholly disagreeing with the investigators. However, there are so many misinterpretations of this data. There are so many errors with not collecting the information that was required. And we found another bombshell within this data. So I'm certainly not agreeing with the state or the investigation team in this, but I'm also not believing that the data shows anything completely and wholly different from the fact that the girls were abducted and unfortunately murdered fairly soon after the abduction. And the phone lay under Abby's body at the crime scene throughout the night. It's a horrific image, and the series was a difficult one to do because we were literally looking into the final moments of those beautiful girls' lives. The bombshell that we found, however, is that as Abby and Libby are approaching the Monon High Bridge, it appears that they receive a Snapchat notification, and it appears as though they reply to that Snapchat notification, most likely with a direct message and most likely with a video. Now, we've heard about various photos. We've seen various photos that were taken in the kind of preceding hour or so before the abduction. We've seen the bridge guy video, but nobody has heard about another video that the girls may have taken, or at the very least photos, as they approached the Monon High Bridge. Who were they sending that to? What was in that video? None of that is known. And we've kind of hypothesized here that that most likely was communication with whoever they trusted and intended to meet at the trails that day. And there's a whole lot more about why we think that. So check out the missing snap video to find out more. We're moving into the car analysis and the weird and wonderful stories of car sightings and the discrepancies and holes in the investigation again. And we're also looking at the fact that the CCTV camera footage of the Hoosier Harvest store, which shows vehicles that were headed towards the trails and the CPS building that day, just doesn't add up either. So there's lots that we've covered so far, and we're going to continue to look into lots more angles. We've started to look at why Rick Allen is an unlikely suspect in this case and why, in my opinion, he's a forensic unicorn. Because nothing in Rick's history, nothing in Rick's characteristics, and nothing in his post-incarceration behaviour is consistent with someone who could have committed a sadistic crime like this. And finally, because I am a psychologist, I've brought some of my colleagues into the fold, and we've discussed the psychology of Rick Allen, and we've also discussed, I guess, the psychological aspects and diagnostic considerations within the case. So I really want to warmly welcome you to the community. Thanks for checking us out. Please watch the explainer video if you don't know anything about Delphi. If you already know about Delphi, then check out all of the lives. The way that they work usually is a progression of thinking and an evolution of ideas as we discuss them. I kind of like to bring you guys along with my thought process. And so you see this unfolding and I guess fine-tuning of our analysis and ideas over time. I really, really appreciate the support. Oh, hey, Dita. Nice to see you. And I'll catch you guys all tomorrow when we do the official live. Oh, thanks, Sergeant Mike. Yeah, it's my pleasure. I really am finding this case such a meaningful case to cover. And I suppose I didn't mention, and I mean, most of the people in here already know, but the reason I cover this case is because I truly want justice for Abby, for Libby, and for Rick Allen. And as someone who believes Rick Allen is not the offender of this crime, I think it's just so important that this case gets looked into further. I just wanted to pop on and say hello in case any of the new subscribers wanted to say hi, but I'll be back with a proper video in about 13 hours. We're going to continue with our Forensic Unicorn series, and then there's plenty more to come. I'll see you guys all tomorrow. Have a good day or night wherever you are. Bye.